Microsoft Access 2010 Advanced Field Properties. The two very advanced field properties that Access provides is validation rule and input mask. These two validate the data that a user enters. Validation rules can be used when you want to specify the data that should be entered in a record. For example, in the birth date field, the validation rule indicates that the date should be after 1995-01-01. When validation rules are violated, a validation text can be set to guide the user to enter the correct data. Let's see how this works. When you move to Datasheet View, and if you remember well, our validation rule indicated that the year should be after 1995-01-01. Let's try and enter a date before that. The validation text appears the moment that the validation rule has been violated. This guides the user to enter the correct data. In this case, it states that the value must be greater than 01/01/1995. If we do not fix this, Access will not allow us to move further. Let's try and set a validation rule on room. If you look at the room field, you will see that there are values between 401 and 410. When you switch to Design View, move to Room, we are going to enter a validation rule. Validation rules use criteria. Criteria are things like greater than and equal to, smaller than, and between. In this case, we will be using the between criteria. You will remember that the room numbers are between 400 and 410. It is advisable to enter validation text to guide the user as to what should be entered. In this case, we will say enter a room number between 400 and 410. Let's see what happens when we switch to Datasheet View. Remember to save the table. It's going to ask you whether it should test all the existing data. We are going to say yes. Now, let's try and insert a room number below 400 and see what happens. The validation text that we entered appears to guide us as to what should be entered. We are correcting the room number, and now we are allowed to move on. Input mask. If you want to make sure that certain fields have a consistent format, in this case phone numbers, you can control the way the user enters the data by using an input mask. We would be moving to the input mask property. If you select the input mask wizard, you will be given some options. In our case, we would use the phone number option. When you click on Next, you will see that the input mask is already supplied without the brackets. You can choose to include brackets or spaces where necessary. Once you click on Next, it will ask you whether you want to store the data with the symbols or without. In our case, our data is without the symbols. When you click on Next, it will ask you whether you have included all the options and then click on Finish. Note what happens in the input mask. If you want to see more options available in the input mask, you will have to click on F1 and the help option will give you the characters that you can use for the input mask.